Tom got a raise. Not a small one either. A real raise. The kind he had been working toward for 2 years. The kind he had stayed late for, skipped lunches for, taken on extra projects for without being asked. His manager called him into the office on a Tuesday afternoon, told him his performance had been outstanding, slid a piece of paper across the desk, and said the company valued him enormously and wanted to reflect that. Tom looked at the number on that paper and felt something he had not felt in a long time. Like the system was finally working in his favor. Like the sacrifice was paying off. Like he was finally getting ahead. He called his wife on the way home. They went out for dinner that night. Not their usual place, somewhere nicer. He ordered a bottle of wine he would not normally have ordered. He felt, for the first time in a long time, genuinely optimistic about where his financial life was heading. He had more money coming in every month. He was being responsible. He was doing everything right. He was earning his way to wealth exactly the way everyone had always told him you were supposed to. 12 months later, Tom sat down to do his annual financial review. He opened a spreadsheet. He looked at his income, his expenses, his savings, his net worth, and he felt that feeling again, the one that had become uncomfortably familiar over the past few years. Not quite anger, not quite confusion, something sitting between the two. Because despite earning significantly more money than he had earned the previous year, his actual wealth had barely moved. He had made more. He had kept almost none of it, and he needed to understand exactly how that was possible and why nobody had ever warned him it was coming. Here is the first thing Tom discovered, and it reframed everything he thought he knew about income. There is a fundamental difference between earning money and building wealth. Most people spend their entire lives focused entirely on the first thing, while almost completely ignoring the second. And the reason they ignore it is not laziness or stupidity. It is because every system they grew up inside, school, family, society, the media, taught them that earning more was the path to having more. Get good grades, get a good job, get a raise, get a promotion, keep climbing. The more you earn, the richer you become. That is the story. That is the deal. That is what responsible adults do. The problem is that the story is not true. Earning more money does not automatically translate into building more wealth. In fact, for most people, a higher salary actively works against wealth building in ways that are almost perfectly designed to keep them exactly where they started. And the mechanisms that make this happen are not accidents. They are features of a system that benefits enormously from keeping the majority of people dependent on their next paycheck regardless of how large that paycheck becomes. Tom's raise was 20%. He went from earning $50,000 a year to $60,000 a year. $10,000 extra dollars every single year. He did the math before he spent a single cent of it. $10,000 a year is $833 a month. He thought about what that money could do. Invested at a 7% average annual return over 20 years, that $10,000 per year becomes over $400,000. The raise alone, if invested completely, would fundamentally change his retirement. He was genuinely excited. He felt like he had cracked the code. Then the first paycheck arrived, and Tom looked at the actual number deposited into his account. It was not what he expected, because what Tom had not fully understood before that moment was exactly how the tax system treats additional income. His first $50,000 was taxed at one rate. His additional $10,000 was taxed at a significantly higher rate, because it pushed him into a higher marginal tax bracket. By the time federal income tax, state income tax, Social Security, and Medicare had taken their share, Tom's $10,000 raise had become approximately $6,500 in actual take-home pay. He had earned $10,000 more. He had received $6,500. The government had quietly taken the first cut before Tom had touched a single dollar of it. $6,500 was still meaningful money, still $540 a month. Tom adjusted his mental model and kept going. But this was only the first mechanism. The tax bracket was just the beginning. The second mechanism is called lifestyle inflation, and it is the single most powerful and least discussed force working against ordinary people building wealth from a salary. Here is exactly how it operates. Tom got his raise. Tom felt richer. Tom started spending like someone who was richer, not dramatically, not recklessly, just gradually and almost imperceptibly in ways that felt completely reasonable given his new income level. He upgraded his car lease when it came up for renewal, just a little nicer than the previous one. He reasoned that he could afford it now. He and his wife started going out to dinner more often, twice a week instead of once. He upgraded his gym membership to the one with the better facilities. He started buying slightly better versions of things he already bought: better wine, better cuts of meat, better shoes. He booked a slightly nicer hotel on their annual vacation. He bought a better phone when his old one started slowing down. None of these decisions felt extravagant in isolation. Each one felt like a reasonable reward for working hard and earning more. Each one felt like what people at his new income level were supposed to do. But Tom added it up 12 months later, and the numbers told a different story. His monthly expenses had increased by almost exactly the amount his take-home pay had increased. He had earned more. He had spent more. His savings rate, the percentage of his income he was actually keeping and building with, had barely changed at all. He had inflated his lifestyle to precisely match his income increase, and ended the year almost exactly as wealthy as he had started it despite earning significantly more. The raise had not made him richer. It had made him more expensive. This is not a coincidence. Lifestyle inflation is not a personal failing or a character flaw. It is a predictable and well-documented psychological response to increased income that happens to almost every person who receives a raise without a deliberate plan for where that money is going to go before it arrives. The brain does not experience a raise as an investment opportunity. It experiences a raise as permission. Permission to upgrade. Permission to reward. Permission to finally buy the things you told yourself you could not afford before. And every single industry that profits from consumer spending, advertising, retail, automotive, hospitality, fashion, food and beverage, is perfectly positioned to absorb that permission the moment it is granted. Tom thought about the advertising he was exposed to every single day. Every ad he saw was selling him an upgraded version of something he already had. A better car, a better phone, a better vacation, a better version of his life available for a monthly payment that was just slightly more than what he was currently paying. The entire consumer economy is structured around the assumption that when people earn more, they spend more. And that assumption is correct for the vast majority of people the vast majority of the time, because nobody ever taught them the alternative. Nobody ever sat them down and explained clearly and directly that the raise is either an investment or a lifestyle upgrade, and that it is almost impossible to make it both. But here is where Tom's discovery went deeper than just tax brackets and lifestyle inflation. Because even if Tom had been perfectly disciplined, even if he had taken his entire after-tax raise and saved every single cent of it in his savings account, he would still have been losing the wealth-building game because of a third mechanism that operates silently and invisibly on every dollar that sits in cash: inflation. The United States Federal Reserve targets an inflation rate of roughly 2% per year. In recent years, actual inflation has run significantly higher than that. What inflation means in practical terms is that every dollar Tom holds loses purchasing power over time. A dollar today buys less than a dollar bought 5 years ago, and more than a dollar will buy 5 years from now. If Tom's salary increases by 3% per year, but inflation is running at 4%, Tom's real purchasing power is actually declining despite his nominal income going up. He is earning more numbers. He is able to buy less with them. His salary is going up. His wealth is going down. And the gap between those two things is one of the most important concepts in personal finance that almost nobody ever teaches in school. Tom looked at his salary over the previous 10 years. It had increased steadily. He was earning significantly more than he had been earning a decade ago. But when he adjusted those numbers for inflation and looked at what his income could actually buy, the improvement was far smaller than the nominal numbers suggested. He had spent 10 years working harder, taking on more responsibility, earning promotions and raises, and his real purchasing power had improved by a fraction of what the numbers on his payslips implied. The salary was growing. The wealth was barely moving. And the system was designed to make those two things look like the same thing when they absolutely were not. Tom asked himself a question that changed the entire way he thought about his working life. Why do wealthy people not rely on salaries? He looked at the genuinely wealthy people he knew of, not celebrities, not tech billionaires, but the quietly wealthy people in his city who owned multiple properties and businesses and never seemed to stress about money. Almost none of them had built their wealth through a salary. Almost all of them had built it through ownership. They owned things that generated income, whether they worked or not. Businesses, properties, investments, assets that appreciated in value and threw off cash flow simultaneously. Their income did not stop when they stopped working. Their wealth did not depend on showing up somewhere every morning and exchanging their time for a paycheck. The salary is a trade. You give your time. You receive money. The moment you stop giving your time, the money stops. Every single month you must show up and perform, or the income disappears. The wealthy person's income does not work this way. The wealthy person's income comes from assets, things they own that generate returns on their own. The business earns money while the owner sleeps. The rental property collects rent whether the owner is present or not. The index fund compounds year after year without requiring a single additional hour of the owner's time. The fundamental difference between the person who works for money and the person who has money working for them is not intelligence or education or even how hard they work. It is what they did with the money they earned when they had it. Tom thought about every raise he had ever received, every bonus, every overtime payment, every extra dollar that had come in above his base salary. He thought about where all of that money had gone. Some of it had gone to taxes immediately. Some of it had inflated his lifestyle gradually. Some of it had sat in a savings account earning almost nothing while inflation quietly eroded it. Almost none of it had been deployed into assets that would generate returns on their own. He had earned a significant amount of money over his working life, and he had almost nothing to show for it in terms of assets that could generate income without him. He had been running as fast as he could on a treadmill that was designed to keep him running forever. This is not a personal failure. This is the design. The economy functions because the majority of people spend the majority of what they earn. Consumer spending is the engine of economic growth. Advertising exists to ensure that increased income gets converted into increased consumption as efficiently as possible. The tax system takes its share before you can make any decisions. Lifestyle inflation takes most of what remains. Inflation erodes the rest. And the savings account, as we covered in a previous video, quietly transfers the last remaining value from your pocket to the bank's profit column. Every mechanism in the system is pointed in the same direction, away from your wealth and towards someone else's. Tom closed his spreadsheet. He sat in silence for a long moment. Then he did what he had started doing every time he discovered something that changed the way he understood money. He asked himself one simple question. If wealthy people do not build wealth through salaries, how do they build it? And the answer was simpler than he expected and more accessible than he had assumed. They build it by turning income into assets as quickly and consistently as possible. Every dollar that comes in gets evaluated not as money to spend, but as a decision point. Does this dollar go toward consumption, food, lifestyle, entertainment, things that disappear the moment they are purchased? Or does this dollar go toward an asset, something that will be worth more in the future or generate additional income on its own? Wealthy people are not necessarily more disciplined than everyone else. They simply operate with a different default. Their default is asset first, consumption from what remains. Most people operate with the opposite default, consumption first, asset from what remains. And what remains after consumption is almost always nothing. Tom made a decision that evening that was so simple, it almost felt anticlimactic. He set up an automatic transfer for the day after every paycheck. Before he could see the money, before lifestyle inflation could touch it, before the consumer economy could absorb it, a fixed percentage of every paycheck went directly into a brokerage account invested in a low-cost global index fund. Not after his expenses, before them. He decided what he was going to invest first and lived on what remained rather than the other way around. He paid himself first. He built the asset before he built the lifestyle. And the month he started doing that was the month his financial trajectory changed permanently. The salary did not change. The raise did not get bigger. The tax bracket did not shift. Nothing about the external system changed at all. What changed was Tom's relationship to the money that came in. He stopped seeing his paycheck as income to be managed and started seeing it as raw material to be deployed. Some of it went to assets. The rest funded his life. And the portion that went to assets started compounding, quietly, automatically, without requiring any additional decisions or discipline or effort, building a base of wealth that grew independently of how many hours Tom worked or whether his next performance review went well or whether his company decided to give raises that year. The salary is not the enemy. The salary is the starting material. The question is never how much you earn. The question is always what you do with it in the first 24 hours after it arrives. Because in those 24 hours, the tax system has already taken its share. Lifestyle inflation is waiting. The consumer economy is ready. Inflation is running. Every force is pointed at that money and pointed away from you. The only force that can redirect it toward your actual long-term wealth is a deliberate decision made before the money arrives about exactly where it is going to go the moment it does. Tom still goes to work every morning. He still earns a salary. He still gets performance reviews and occasionally gets raises. But he no longer believes the raise is what will make him wealthy. He knows now that the raise is just more raw material, more starting point. more opportunity to buy assets before the system absorbs it. The salary was never going to make him rich. It was never designed to. But the assets he buys with it, quietly, automatically, every single month, those are building something that the salary alone never could. Tom is not waiting for a big enough raise anymore. He already has everything he needs. And now, so do you.